So I have the pleasure this evening of introducing Pastor Felicia Udo-Okan of Word of Life International to lead our opening spiritual moment. Word of Life International is in the Longwood section of the Bronx and is a very vibrant Christian church that also does wonderful community service, including having a very active food pantry. Pastor Felicia, are you co-pastor, co-senior pastor? What's your title?
A senior pastor.
Senior pastor. And with that, Pastor Felicia, we welcome you and are eager to hear what you have to share.
First of all, I want to say thank you for letting me be part of this team. I'm so grateful and thankful to God for the opportunity God has given me to be part of this team. At this very moment, I would like us to be silent, be grateful and be thankful. Let's just take 1 minute to reflect on all the good things God have done for us, for all the good things God is doing for us right now, for all the good things He is going to do for us tomorrow as we remain silent. Dear Lord, we've gathered together today for the opportunity you've given us to be alive. Your word says, according to the book of Proverbs, chapter 15, verse 17, better a bread crust shed in love and a slab of prime rib saved in hate. Another translation says, a simple meal with love is better than a feast where there is hatred. And dear Lord, we're praying that you bless us with your divine love. Let your divine love flow in our hearts. And let us be grateful and thankful. Thank you for satisfying us with long life and prosperity and strength to be able to live this life you've given us freely. We are so thankful, Lord. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor Felicia. That was really beautiful. We're starting today with some overview of where we've been so far, because today we're moving from talking about big questions and big ideas and systems and food justice issues to speaking about what is it that we can do, going deeper into what kind of projects do each of you want to carry forward and develop as part of your involvement in this program. And so this is like a shift. We've been doing the action of mindful eating, hopefully throughout the program. Hopefully many of you have taken the challenge that we offered you earlier on in this at the beginning of the program to have one mindful eating a day, one mindful meal a day. I hope that many of you have been able to experiment with that. So I want to start today. I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the ideas that we've been talking about over the past few weeks together. And then we're going to move into some of the ideas that have already been discussed. And then we're going to talk about, Alex is going to lead us through thinking about how do we move from learning to action? And how do we have some of the courageous conversations that are needed in order for us to bring forth what, as Felicia was so beautifully saying, the love of God into all of our lives and particularly into these food systems. So we started, as you may remember, with this wonderful video of where Chef Alex was interviewing Father David. And even as I think about that, that seems like a long time ago where we were all sitting together watching that video. And of course, as you may remember, there was a clear sense of both the biblical, the practical, the spiritual, and the community aspects of mindful eating for the beloved community that came out in that video and in the conversations that followed it. We did a deep dive into mindfulness and mindful eating, looking at through both a series of presentations by Chef Alex and a series of recipes. And we got many positive responses from those recipes. And many of you were trying those recipes out in your own kitchens. And I'm hoping that you have been continuing some of those recipes. We're going to be asking you to contribute to our reservoir of recipes as we continue. Then we recognize that in order to look at these questions of what is it that each individual is eating and our desire to be eating healthy in our own bodies and in our own lives, we had to recognize that there were these larger dynamics at play, larger dynamics that have been interfering with our ability to have healthy lives for a good 300 to 500 years, depending upon where you are coming from. And that we can see that the legacies of dis-ease are part of this overarching legacies of racism and of slavery. As we continued, we took a forward focus, focusing on what we can do and what people are doing. We looking at the food systems. We had a number of really powerful diagrams. I was particularly struck by the work that Chef Alex had presented in his MEBC, BCA Global Food Systems diagram, in which he was looking not just at agriculture and production, but also at social emotional health of employees, the importance of capacity building, career opportunities and life skills, leadership development, the impact through healthcare and insurance and pharmaceuticals, hotels, and there are other forms of agricultural and production spaces. So we see the food system is in some ways much bigger than just what's happening at the grocery store, and even much bigger than what goes from farm to table to compost, that simple cycle of from production to consumption to waste. The food system is even bigger than that and incorporates many different aspects of health and wellness, hospitals and hospitalities, education and housing. We then, we then went into food justice, looking at food apartheid, food deserts, and food swamps, and then food policy solutions and the commercial determinants of health. You probably remember some of the great slides from Kelly's presentation on that. So now we've been going, and some of that last time we went into food justice and some of the leading faith leadership. And we do see examples of faith leaders across the country who are coming from BIPOC communities, who are really doing innovative and community building experiences in their home churches. During this time, we have experienced the month of Ramadan together. We are particularly grateful for our Muslim brothers and sisters for sharing with us some of their experiences of Ramadan and for the continual conversations, which have not always been easy, but have certainly been educational and supportive of one another. And as we're going forward, throughout this time, we've been inviting you to look not just at your own personal food experience with eating and food health, but also, of course, at these larger systems, and where is it that you are making a difference and where you are taking action now, and how is it that you might want to continue and further that action. So Kelly, I think you're going to summarize for us at this point some of what we've been saying, like feedback to the group as a whole. Is that correct?
I can do that next, unless we wanted to do a bit of a discussion first.
Yeah, we could do that.
Sure.
What stood out to people?
Yeah, so I kind of gave a really brief, rough overview. And I'm just wondering if, as you listen to me describe that overview, What is it that what stands out to you? Just like as I described that whole picture. It could be connections between them. It doesn't have to be a particular session, but like what's sort of in your mind now as you look back over what we've done so far? What were some of the things that we talked about that really resonated with you, that you're still remembering now?
Well, how about we do a word cloud? Would that be a fun exercise to do a round robin real quick on that note? Everybody thinks that's a fun idea? Okay.
Yeah.
So Lanice, you go. So we're cooking up social change with everything Sarah did really a great job of overviewing what we've went over. You know, the essence and the outcome of this is to create a higher level of impact and social impact with this information. So it's like we've learned so much, and now it's like, how do we cook up, no pun intended, how do we cook up this social change, right? And when you think about cooking up social change, I always compare it to a chowder. Why I compare it to a chowder is because if you don't like carrots, it's going to be really hard to get rid of those carrots. Or if you like onions, you probably can't even find them. So how do we cook up this change that is both sustainable and really hard to undo, in our own communities? And so, if you could just, if it makes it easier, what is that one word? And you could put it in the chat and just verbalize it. But what that one word that really inspires you to cook up social change based on where we are right now in the program. And Lanice, you go first since you were nodding the hardest.
Well, first, I apologize for being late, so forgive me. The one word that comes to mind is awareness.
Awareness.
Mhm.
And why? And how does that? How do you think that fits in?
Well, it fits in because of all that we've talked about over the last few weeks, and even in doing the food segments with you, Alex, it just makes you more aware of where food comes from, and it makes you more aware of the communities that can't get certain types of foods that we've talked about in the past few weeks. And it makes me anyway, look at, when I go shopping, I'm more aware of, where did this come from? What region did this come from? How was this harvested? So before you just go to the store, I'm picking up what I need and I'm out. Now I'm taking a little bit more time.
Okay, great. Who would like to go next? Paula?
So I think what comes up for me is really being very eager to share this, what I'm learning with other people, and really educating, because it just can't stay with me. It has to go, and to other people as well, and making them aware using Lanice's word. And then I have been doing that, actually. I have been doing that. And even people know now, oh, Wednesday, that's your mindful eating day. And so that, they want to know, well, what have I learned? And I've also actually bought the book for 3 people. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Who else? Who would like to go next?
I'll go, Flora.
Okay, thank you, Flora.
Yes, I was checking out, like other lady was saying about when you go to the store, how you more observant now, looking at the packages before you buy something. And when you ask the people in the stores where did their product come from, they don't really know themselves. When you ask them what farm did it come from, was it harvested in the United States or whatever, they just have stickers on their fruit and have a farm, like farm share or farmers, whatever, but they don't know where the food come from. They don't know how it's harvested. They don't know who works on the farm. And I found that was very surprising, that they didn't know much about the things that they were selling themselves.
So what is the one word that you would distill that down to be?
I still like the educational part, awareness and education.
Okay, another awareness. Big one there. Who else would like to go?
It's Sharon. I missed a few classes, but I'm just touching and remembering on the relation and correlation between sugarcane, cotton, and how systemic racism covertly operates in our food system. And most of the public is not aware what's going on with marketing and how it's poisoning the communities and causing all these health disparities, if that's relevant what I'm saying. So
Of
covert.
course. Covert racism.
Systemic racism and covert, not openly acknowledged or displayed. It's
Okay.
systemic racism is hidden in our food marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and what if more people knew about it? Then we could actually do
Yes.
something. But they keep us
Exactly.
in the dark.
Exactly.
Who else would like to
And
go?
it's all about profit.
Yeah,
It's
I would like,
profit over humanity. That's
Profit
what it
over
is. It's
people.
profit over. Exactly.
yeah, I would like to say something in regards to what the scripture said that I read earlier. You know, some of these farmers are not well taken care of. They are being treated as animals. Even animals are well taken care of than the people that work in this farm. And when we go to the grocery store, we just buy the food. You know, we practice mindful eating, but it's a little bit deeper than that. According to the research that I did for my school, for my master's program, I discovered that these people that are harvesting these vegetables for us to eat comfortably and all that, they are not well taken care of. They can't even have time to go to the bath, to use the bathroom. And they pee on themselves. They have not been treated fairly at all. So I think if there is love, they can, if the big corporation can think twice and know that these people are human beings and do unto these people as they would like to be treated themselves, I think the world will be better than what it is. That's what I wanted to say.
Anyone else would like to contribute?
Well, mine is close to my sister there because mine was valuing the production and the process of getting the foods that we eat to us, and that we need to value them more. Those who work on the farms, those who produce, those are actual farmers. They have 24/7 their job. They don't have days off. They don't have holidays. And then the ones that transport it, the ones that pack it. So mine is similar to is valuing the process, the producing of the foods that we eat.
So Alex, I'll go next. Patricia.
Mm-hmm.
And my word is transformation. And I'm thinking about the piece that Kelly did with the food swamp and the deserts and all that. I think, if we begin to be mindful about those teachings and those lessons, that, we could begin transformation within ourselves and within the community. So that's the word I want to lift up for today.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that we're missing? I kind of lost track. But anyone care to share?
Yeah, Sheko and yes, it's me.
Mm-hmm. Please.
Okay. One of them I can say is awareness, because just this past weekend I was in a food pantry, the one with Word of Life, and I started looking at it differently. Just thinking about all the safety measures that's from the transportation to the food all the way to get to our kitchen tables. I start seeing things differently. So I'm thinking it's something I'm thinking about. Just what you said, the awareness of things, and then eating in community too. That's what I'm thinking. That eating together, that's something I just paying more mind since I start doing these classes now. I start seeing that it's eating together and managing my time around eating now is something very, very big around me now. So every time I have food on the table, I start thinking about all these things we did all these days So looking at it differently now and thinking about everything that was done behind it. From the sugars thing we talked about, all this stuff, the safety we talk about, so many things that's now I look at the world different now from eating now. So seeing the healthy food on our community now and comparing to the healthy food in the other community now, I start seeing the difference now and paying it more mind now. So I'm seeing that every part of the city I go now, I see what type of food is distributing and what I'm getting in my community now. So it's so much stuff I'm getting out of these things. And I thank everybody for that.
Thank you. That was a good one. All right, did that cover everyone? Was this anyone that didn't? Somebody's hands raised?
David, yeah.
Oh, David, please.
Yeah, so I put down also knowing that awareness is actually mostly the common topic of this for this question. I also put down that we need to try to be resistant to temptation mostly and try to be more mindful, because that's what it's mostly leading to. Knowing that we're tempted to try and to stick with what we usually like to eat most of the time. Like, well, I guess whether it's fatty foods or whichever we're interested in, it's good to be more mindful and more aware that there's a lot more ways we can try to better ourselves and to like become more healthy, be more part of our community more. So I think we should just try to like break free from what we are tempted to eat or what we're tempted to do for what we do all the time, like routinely, and just try to break out. Be more of the community, do what others do, try to be out there and try to participate more.
Community participation. Okay. Is that everyone? Did we get everyone?
I have another suggestion. Moving home economics. Before it was actually culinary arts, it was home economics in the 60s. Moving that back into the school system from elementary on up. They taught, home economics, how to sew, how to cook, how to balance the checkbook, moving those things back into the school system.
Yes, I'm a home
educating, children in regards to food. Yes, which it started in the 60s, and they've taken all those things out of the school system. So that's a thought.
Okay.
Alex,
so I'll
please,
turn.
Alex,
yes, please.
Since I joined this mindful eating team, I've learned so much. And what happened is that I've stopped being wasteful. I used to throw a lot of food away. So, and as I said earlier, I think twice what those people are doing in the farm, what these people, how they've been deprived to live a normal life. So I even tell people in the pantry, if you know you don't like what you are taking, just leave it behind for somebody else. So I'm now more mindful than before. And I want to thank you guys for what you guys have done, opening my eyes more to take things more serious and be grateful because we are so privileged in this country. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this was one of our good word cloud group discussions. Thank you so much for everyone to contribute in the way that they did in such a an intentional way. So I'll turn this over to, am I missing somebody?
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Okay, I have a question that my daughter asked me last time, and she was telling me that every time you live from this mindful eating, you want to set us up differently. So she's asking me that it's a battle here in the house, that eating real food together, that's what she was saying, eating real food together, or eating what we love, because it's a fight of culture in the house. So since they was born here and raised, so they want to always eat the food they want to eat. So we have this culture food. So he tell me that when you go back to, he said, when you go back to your teacher, ask them, should we eat real food together or should we eat what we love? So that's, he want me to bring back that answer today when I come back from this meeting. So what
I mean,
he-
we can all, I think we could all chime in on that. You know, my son would eat McDonald's every day if I allowed him to, you know. Clearly there are some things that we love that are not so good for us that we have to put in the treat category, you know. You know, do I tell people not to indulge in anything that they love? No, I just say that, you know, you need to make it a treat. And, you know, if it's once or twice a month, you know, that's really in balance. What you do want to do is try new things. You know, my son is almost 6. At 3 years old, I started feeding him seaweed. Now his favorite snack in the world is seaweed, and people are like, well, how did you do that? And the way the brain functions is if you don't try things several times, you cannot acquire the taste with your brain being connected. And that's why a lot of people, and even culturally in communities of color, will say, oh, I don't like this, but they've never tried it. And that's also like a generational thing that we need to be aware of. So I think it's a combination. I think it's about balance. I think it's around, you know, but my son knows, you know, oh, we've been to McDonald's last week, we shouldn't go this week because I don't want childhood diabetes. I'm like, that's great. You know, you're on the right track. And there is, you know, childhood diabetes and things of that nature that we need to be aware of, that because unfortunately, you know, sick young people tend to grow up, you know, as adults with some of the same sicknesses. Does that answer your question? And someone else can give a better answer.
that was good. That was good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Kelly, take it away. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, and if I could just add on to that for a second, you know, just in relation to the idea of loving food, like it just makes me think. My grandfather always said, "You don't love things, you love people. You like things." So I always think about that. You know, loving food versus liking food and loving people. So yeah, and we could think about. I mean, also just as David said earlier, you know, resisting temptation. So I think that's another thing to think about, because, you know, humans were evolved to want this sugary, salty, fatty taste, you know, because there wasn't a lot of it. But, you know, in the world that we have today, we have to get over some of that evolutionary desire for some of those tastes. So just to go into a bit, I was just going to review some of the pieces around the breakout groups that we had in session 5, some of the topics that came up, you know, of ideas of like, you know, what are people doing or thinking about doing, like what are things that we could do moving forward. And some of the ideas that came up were around family dinners, the importance of breakfast, and also within the churches, like parish dinners and having those together, having more intergenerational meals, mindful eating for children, food education for kids, more home cooking, urban gardening, church garden, church farm share, field trips for kids to learn how food is grown and made, the importance of promoting eating more plants and less animal products, educational campaigns around fast food and what I call the standard American diet, versus, you know, the traditional foods. You know, there's the expansion of this standard American diet to other countries, you know, this global expansion, whereas we could be considering more about the traditional foods in other countries, and, you know, bringing that here as well, multicultural food within a community, and thinking about more faith-based resources on food, such as Bible study resources, and then educational campaign targeted to expectant mothers. So that was all part of one section. And then some of the other ideas that came up were education around ultra-processed foods, zoning to limit fast food, and then the commercial determinants of health policy opportunities that we went over, and then promoting farmers markets, rescuing food from farmers markets, addressing some of the the root causes of food insecurity and tackling interconnected issues like education, homelessness, etc. Preventing food waste, both on an individual scale as well as a large scale with large companies. And then what are policy and government solutions to that? Institutional procurement, so thinking about how are we feeding large groups of people at once? Where does that food come from? How is it prepared? Power dynamics of food service workers and capacity to make changes to the food system. And then the quality of food in stores and improving that. Looking at pricing, especially of vegetables, thinking about expanding this program, this mindful eating for the beloved community program, doing an immersion experience to a farm upstate. And then the South Bronx Community Food Chain Project that Word of Life is doing that connects all these dots together. So those are some of the things that we went over in the past 2 sessions, just as to refresh people's memories as we think about, what do we want to focus on moving forward, and what does each group want to commit to. And I think Alex is going to talk more about that now.
Absolutely. So, part of the strategy of going from learning to action are the mechanisms or the tools that need to be employed or deployed. And one of those things is, how to have a courageous conversation. Doing this work isn't easy. I could tell you firsthand. It could, turn into a social justice blood sport because you're fighting some some of the evils that exist, and it's literally one of the toils and I would say the toxicity of what is the cause and effect of systemic racism. So confronting it on all those different levels, where it's someone at the top of the systems change level, and being able to confidently walk the walk and articulate or emotionally intelligently argue and debate what you're presenting as a case, to some of our own friends and family in the community, which may be defensive when you try to talk to them about changing the way they eat, or not cooking with lard, or a lot of different things that are really culturally almost ingrained in the community, and really need mindfully intentional, courageous conversations to kind of lead them in the direction of being more educated about things that they need to know to make more empowered choices. That all said, I'd like to, Lanice, if you don't mind, just give a little snippet, since you're in our fellowship class, around, and just, you can keep this very short, what your take on our segment of having a courageous conversation was like for you.
Oh, okay. Having a courageous conversation in the other mindful eating in the fellowship class, that was very interesting, because what I did was I spoke with some seniors that live in my community and some family members and some of my friends, and a lot of them were more inclined to eat fast food because it was just more convenient for them. And they never thought about, as we were saying here, really where did the food comes from. They never thought about how, if they go back to when their parents and grandparents used to cook, they would make a big meal on Sunday, but they would also make an extra meal so that you had food for about 3 or 4 days. They didn't cook all the time, every day, some of them, because, like my mom worked, so she cooked 2 or 3 things for us to eat. So that brought some awareness to the community, if that's something that they could do. Also, as someone said earlier in the group, we have pantries up here, and go to the pantry, get the food that you like, go home, prepare it. You can freeze some of the things you make, and then this way, when you want to eat, you just bring it out and you take it out. I cooked some meals for some of the seniors up here because they don't have that ability anymore. So I take the time out, I cook for them, I deliver the food to them, and I keep it moving. And that's something I think it's bringing the community together. Some of the other people in our group talked about how hard it was to get decent food in their communities, and how they talked to some of their representatives about it, how they were giving people lard to cook because they didn't know any better. They thought, oh, well, we heard that this is what you cook with. Well, I don't think we even use lard in God knows the day, because we know better. When you know better, you do better.
So thank you, Lenny. So that's an
You're welcome.
example of people going, and we call this courageous conversations because these are new conversations for some friends, family in the community. I also applaud the individuals that actually went to the people that make policy and their political representatives and saying, this isn't good. Maybe you don't know it's good, but I want to let you know on the record that this is absolutely not good. And this is what you should be doing. And so, having, those courageous conversations is really the start and a really powerful tool in moving from learning to action. And Bob, could you just, and I have 4 slides to share with everyone, with half of this information being from the King Center, that really kind of constructs the framework for having a courageous conversation. And well, this is, directly from the King Center. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness, which are the trifecta of every hard line dilemma. Oh, you can go back. In our community, it says it won't be tolerated because the global international standards of human decency will not allow it, and that only can take place with a large collective of individuals who are skilled in articulating, and having a courageous conversation. So again, a lot of our framework is based around this beloved community. Our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives. And what this really speaks to is that, and I learned this through part of my Kellogg Fellowship, unless we're able to change people's hearts, we're not going to be able to change their minds. So part of the skill of having a courageous conversation is connecting with people, and it might be, as something as intimate as their children or the community's children, connecting it to the future, and really having a powerful emotional connection, so that they will have this contemplativeness around changing how they think. Again, it's not easy. It's impossible to move the needle if the needle's welded. That's my new quote. Next slide.
It's the first of 2.
But I like how so, that's what Scott was talking about there. We got get somebody on mute. Okay. So converting learning into action. All right. And these are some of the steps that are outlined by the King Center in having a courageous conversation. The first is we got to be totally honest, and what I like to do if it's really a hard, courageous conversation is I let people know up front, I need to be honest with you and communicate something to you, and it's coming from, it's coming from a place of love, so I don't want you to be defensive. So it's kind of like a setup, but you don't want to catch people off guard, because the reaction, in my experience, is never the one that's going to lead to a very productive conversation. And you want to honor people's dignity and their spirit. and, you know, just let them know that you want to have a mutual, respectful conversation, but what you're discussing may be a little uncomfortable, but the outcome or the intention is to create something positive from it. And so obviously that contains listening carefully, trying to understand. Again, when you're communicating with individuals that don't know anything about what you're talking about, I struggle with that. You know, you need to kind of come up with different examples that can bridge the understanding. And you might have to come from a different approach and really give analogies and examples, maybe a little data if they're, you know, a data um, interested person that want to, you know, hear the facts. And that's really how you can have a what I call a highly emotionally intelligent conversation, where the intent again is to um, you know, get into the heart and have this contemplative motion to actually empower the mind to make different and better decisions. Uh, Again, letting people know that, and you could label it, I want to have a courageous conversation. Well, what is that? The definition right there, it's one that is difficult yet necessary to have, with the goal of coming to a common understanding. And I find it's really effective, um, almost in a strange way, that when you define what something is, it eliminates people's assumptions of what you're trying to do. And you know, sometimes I go right to the dictionary. This is exactly what, you know, I'm talking about, and this is the definition. And so, you know, people respond better when they feel that you're not attacking them with your opinion. Rather, you're coming to them in a very intentional way to help and to assist, you know, the community, and them being a major part of that component. And you know, obviously, you know, again, our nation, we could stick on this last point for a very long time, based on our current and past environment. But you know, our communities are under siege, you know, by an increase, at least my observation over the last recent years, an increase in, you know, this contention and being provocative, and what do they call it, gaslighting. And that really makes people confused, and quite honestly, they check out. You know, it's like they're just into self-preservation mode, which is good to have that mode. But if everyone's in a self-preservation mode, who's taking care of the community? Who's taking care of the young people? Who's taking care of the elderly? And that is something really to think about, as this being important to form this collective. So when our communities are healthy, we are working together. You know, a healthy community is more productive. It's proven that it's more social, economically viable. You know, let's face it, if people aren't homesick, you know, they're out doing something, you know, and most of that time is spent on actually protecting and nurturing the children, which is the future. You know, and a lot of people don't understand the dynamics of when you have a poor health community, what the impact is on the children, and wonder why after a generation, what siphons off is a lot of opportunity and a lot of created opportunity loss for communities. And that's something that's a just terrible truth of how systemic racism works, and as that it never wants the whole community to get on its feet. And so we have to be mindful that at the end of the day, everything we're doing right now is to invest in our future, our community future. And that's really the highest, that's the highest stake that we need to keep in mind. And, open hearts and minds, we talked about it. And the beloved community, again, I had such a great time talking to Father David and his perspective of a beloved community. Every religion and sect has a version of a beloved community, and it's all environmental, right? I've learned that we don't have enough safe spaces to have dialogue. And so without creating these spaces like we have in this program, where people can voice how they feel in a space that they know they won't be judged, they don't have to be defensive, it's really how you can create an atmosphere for honest and candid conversations. And you can't do it any other way. Then you have just a whole bunch of people gathered around looking at each other and making funny faces, which is not something that that we really, we really want to look at how we can come together and be engaged and become a family and move as a family in this safe space for more and more powerful, courageous conversations. And lastly, this is a tactic. And, it may not sound so mindful, but we are at war. In some aspects, we really need to look at where our community is under siege. Awareness came up several times about being enlightened about what was happening in a covert operation. And so this is a tactic to turn that around, to unweld the needle so it can move. And that's how we can get to a circle of, plants and animals and the earth and communities, and, not wasting things and things going from dust to dust, and really being in line with the overall universe of things. But this is a tool and a tactic that we are exercising. We're learning. We're learning how to exercise it, and then we're converting that learning into action. And we're going to go a little bit more deeper on how these courageous conversations can manifest into actionable projects, coming together as small groups, as some mentioned in prior sessions, to sit down with some of the local politicians and ask some very poignant questions and demand some answers. And these are all collectively and combined the tactics that we need for social change. So, any questions or quick questions?
I think we're gonna go into small groups next, so we can
Okay.
break down, now that we went through the learning to action, right? Like encourages conversations, how can we brainstorm what are some of those conversations that we want to be having, and what are, in order to change the systems, what steps are we gonna take to get there?
And you know what, if I can suggest, I've got the word cloud ready. So while I'm setting up the small groups to take 2 or 3 minutes, Alex, for you to go over the word cloud, does that sound?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I'll put it in the chat right now that when we go into the small groups that Bob is putting up, we want to invite people to say, where do you want to go into, and who are some people you want to who are some people you want to have courageous conversations with? And you can sort of help each other think about who you want to be having courageous conversations with. So Alex, anything you're noticing about this word cloud? Word awareness?
Well, awareness in people. I think this is a real good Kodak snapshot of what a movement looks like in words. I think everything is really covered in a very powerful way. So I think we could, in part, have this as a point of reference for our small groups as well.
How long are we doing the breakout rooms for?
Let's do no, like 12 minutes or so.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. We're all coming back. Hey, Bob, that was really cool how you did the counter.
Oh, yeah. Just the first week we tried to do this, I just didn't know where to find it. I had seen it, I had experienced it, but
Oh, that was
this
helpful.
is the great thing about practice. You find these places.
That's right.
I don't know about you folks. We had a great conversation in breakout room 1. Very robust.
Is everyone back yet?
Ours was better on room 2.
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
It should have been manual. Yeah. For everybody to return.
Are we going to do any review of the breakout or go right into, well,
Sarah, you're muted.
Let's hear some of the highlights. So, Bob, since you were just saying how great your group was, is there someone from your group, not Bob, who might want to share about what stood out to them?
Well, one of the things that we talked about was introducing certain foods. Some people don't eat vegetables or never ate vegetables or just don't drink water. They've been just drinking sodas. And how difficult that is to introduce that to people and to help them to understand why they should be eating vegetables and should not be drinking soda, and how we have to lead by example, explaining to people what we're doing, and that it's also very hard to have courageous conversations because people if they may see that we're criticizing them and that we, know more than they do, quote unquote. So we have to do it in little baby steps sometimes. So that was part of the conversation that we had. Am I leaving anything out with my group?
Also, I just wanted to point out that there was a point that Flora made in our group that people don't really want to hear what we have to change. They don't want to bother with change. They'd rather just stick with what they're used to eating. It may be unhealthy mostly, instead of just focusing on healthy eating. One thing I pointed out in the group was that usually it's probably because they're sticking to tradition and they don't want to break away from that, and they feel like that if they do, they're losing touch with their roots. But for me, I feel like it's kind of good to it's good to stick with your family history and tradition. You can just add healthy eating to what you have. It's not like you're still, as long as you're having the tradition you're used to, as long as you're sticking with it, there should be no problem at all.
I'm really curious what your experience with that, because and other people's experience with this too, because most traditions will have healthy food in them, somewhere, right? Most cultures have incredibly healthy food in them, but people might have become used to a certain type of food that's not very healthy, or is now no longer so healthy as it used to be. So for you, do you find yourself, and do other people find themselves just trying to highlight those foods from their families that are healthier?
I think it's part of, I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, for example, I mean, there's I'm half Puerto Rican, and there's this, we always have rice and beans, and my grandmother always makes it. I'm telling you, yeah, really, it's a big deal in my family. So we always have it every Saturday whenever I go to her house, and it's basically the main thing. And the way she prepares it, maybe she adds a little bit of oil to it, but the way she makes it, you just really can't break away from like how people prepare it. It's just how you used to, and you still want to break away from that.
Well, like in our culture, we love collard greens. They used to put fat back in there, but now we put smoked turkey. And put olive oil. So, and then they like it just as much as they did when it was with the pork. So a lot of times if you don't tell them that the pork is in there and then they start eating it, they say, oh, this is very good. So, you can just change things around for people. And then they get used to it and they like it.
And David, my wife's Puerto Rican, so I feel your pain when I visit her parents, because it's not like you can't eat the whole plate, and so but I kind of have I love the beans. I'll can I have more beans than rice, which I mean in all aspects it's kind of it's kind of doing a little bit without insulting the culture, because it's really the combination of that huge amount of rice with the beans that does you over, especially if it has the yuca and what's in it. But that's a tough hurdle culturally, and you have to be really creative, like moving to smoked turkey, which is absolutely in a health upgrade from the fat back and the pork lard and the pork belly and the ham hocks, which were notorious, right?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and
I loved them.
Yeah. But it doesn't love you back.
No, I haven't had one in like 40 years, so I wouldn't even know what it tasted like now.
And it takes a while to kind of wean yourself off of certain things, because sugar and salt are extremely addictive. And even the smoked meats, which are also cured and have a lot of sodium, are really, really tough to it takes a lot of time, and it's kind of like taking a week and just drinking tea without sugar. And then the following week you'll drink it, even if you add sugar, you'll add less. So it's really getting your body to compensate, but it's like breaking a drug addiction. I mean, it's like you got to take it as serious as that. And yeah, I'm not gonna.
Well, I just want to say,
Mhm.
my mom is, I'm city born and country raised, I like to say. And a couple of weeks ago I went to my mom's, and she was like, I cooked dinner, I made this and that, she said I made some rice and beans, and I made some pernil, so we call it roast pork, and some cabbage. So she said I made fatback, and she said she put some fatback grease in the cabbage. So I don't cook with fatback. I never cooked with fatback. I made it a point not to do that because I didn't want to get my kids addicted to the fatback. So I didn't. But I said, okay, I'm going to my mom's house. I'm gonna have a little bit of everything and not overdo it. But when I ate the cabbage, I couldn't eat it because I just couldn't take the taste. So I was picking around at the part that didn't have as much of the fatback grease in it. And then she looked at me and she said, oh, I see you didn't really like the cabbage too much. I said, Ma, I had a lot of, I said, it was all right. But she said, I saw you pushing it around the plate. I felt like I was 5. But she called me a couple of days later. She said, yeah, you really didn't like the cabbage too much. I said, Mom, I don't put fatback grease in my cabbage. I don't use that. And it just tasted so much like a lot of fatback, and I couldn't enjoy the cabbage. She said, well, what I'll do for you next time is I'll put something on the side before I add the fatback grease. I wanted to tell her, well, you don't have to add the fatback grease, but I was like, you know what? I didn't want to fight that fight at the moment because she was already a little saucy that I really wasn't enjoying the cabbage like she thought I would.
Mhm.
So, but
Well, that's a positive story.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it wound up being positive. But I just I couldn't do it. I was like, oh no. And not to say I don't love fatback, but I don't keep it in my house on purpose because I know it's, you know, the high blood pressure,
Yeah.
you know, so I may have it in my house once a year, once, and that's maybe every other year because I really don't cook it like that. But yeah,
it puts you in a really difficult position when you're over friends and family.
Yes.
You know, sometimes I have to really, you know, without stretching the truth, say, you know, I have some dietary restrictions, which is really what it is. And people honor that, you know. I have some health concerns and some dietary restrictions, which, to be honest with you, is absolute truth. You know, and people be like, oh, well, then let me make you something separate. You know what I mean? And then they're
Yeah.
not insulted that way. Instead
Right.
of getting a big plate of something that you know you're
You're
gonna
not
be
gonna eat.
suffering. Yeah, yeah.
You're not gonna eat it.
That was a good story. Anyone else or
I think we have time for,
okay.
yeah.
Do a few more of the breakout groups if people wanted to share.
Oh, what about from our group?
Sorry, I'm back in the other meeting, but certainly we talked a lot about how it's necessary for in the schools. So it was a conversation about how is it possible that we can have a conversation with people in the school. One individual spoke about home economics and how that home economics class had a big impact on her life and the life of her children, and how it would be really good to have a dialogue with that. I mentioned about the church suppers and letting the churches serve as role models and examples of how healthy eating could work. You know, by making people love to come to the church suppers, and if healthy eating is there, recipes are there, people are going to say, oh, this is something that is good. Maybe I can try this at home. And then we had some other dialogue as well that come up.
Okay. Sharon, Helena, did you want to add something?
We mentioned contacting our local congressmen, councilmen, in regards to getting laws or bills put in place to maybe explore home economics in the school system from elementary to high school. That's what we discussed.
Mm-hmm. And
because
I know that,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right, and I think that's definitely the entry point, and we probably need to. And Kelly, you're probably the best person around how you can approach a community board as a first level of having courageous conversations. A lot of individuals don't really know how to connect with their local community boards. Do you have any information to share on that?
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because I was just on a call yesterday and they were talking about engaging the community boards, you know, as a way to get information out about the food system. But yeah, there's usually like a health chair or something like that that you can contact. But I would say in relation to the home economics conversation, the Tisch Center for Food Education and Policy at Columbia University, they have a food ed hub. So there's like a whole website with different information about nutrition education. And the New York City Department of Education Office of School Wellness has started to promote that. So it's really up to each individual school wellness council. Schools should have a school wellness council, and they should be able to go on and identify those nutrition education resources. So sometimes those conversations would need to happen with the principal or the school wellness council to get that information in, at least in New York City, because that happens at the city level until we get a state policy that would make it more across the board to have in all schools. Did anyone from our group want to share, Cheku or Rosie?
Basically,
What I was saying is that in order to achieve the goal of food the parties in the South Bronx, we had to work in connection with our community leader, politician, because in order to educate the population how to eat healthy and how to change the habit of being brainwashed with all those propaganda of fast food, cheap food. So we should do something that going beyond and it will be a long-term goal. Also, we were sharing that one of the main things that we can do is start working with the pantry owner in order to motivate them to bring the people of the community onto the mining and understanding where the food that they're eating coming from, how the food is processing, and what will be one of the effect of changing the eating habit. So that's basically was one of the more important points that we're talking in our meeting. Checo, you want to add something?
Yeah, you say most of it. So we were saying just about how the labels on some of the stuff, how they will have more information on the labels on what we getting. So we would be sure about the safety behind what we're getting, and how we should involve the faith leaders, just like you say, the faith leaders and the pantry owners, and to talk about more healthy food. You know, that's mostly what else. I think that's mostly, and the environment, how we should have a safety environment about our food, our community. Kelly, did we skip anything?
I think you covered the main points. Yeah, I think definitely we talked about the transparency, with the food system on the labels, but you covered that.
Regina, do you want to share anything from our group?
Okay. Yes. So in our group, we really talked about how to reach out to not only our particular faith, but reach out to different faith communities and local stakeholders, and really have the courageous conversations. Like, one of the things that stood out for me tonight was the courageous conversations. We always kind of, we say the things that people kind of already know, or we say the things that people are familiar with, but the deeper dive is really where you start to make some headway. So we talked about the importance of not doing what we've already done, so to actually take it a step further and have really courageous conversations. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That was good. And I really noticed that everyone was really speaking towards wanting to have engagement with faith communities, both their own and other, to really be working in an interfaith way in the community, and the power that can have. So we're about at the end of our time here. So Bob, do you just want to end us out with a little bit about what we're going to be doing next? We really want to be focusing, like encouraging you guys to try to have some of these conversations in the next 2 weeks. And Bob, is there anything else you want to say about that?
No, I think that covers it. And I think the small group conversations are kind of ramping up to it nicely. The next 2 sessions, our final 2 sessions we're doing, we're going to be focusing on the barriers to community change and then solutions for community change. So, we want folks to be thinking about the types of projects you want to be involved with your faith organization, your neighbors, your communities, making sure that those projects, they involve education, but they also involve policy change, social change, environmental change, so that you're working with those pieces at the same time. And we will have a menu of some of these projects we talked about, some of which will reflect some of the policy opportunities that Kelly had mentioned during our last session, but also bringing up some of the projects that you folks have mentioned in small groups and in other conversations we've had, to see what really grabs you and motivates you to want to work to make these changes to the food system at the community level, and to start doing these community conversations and these courageous conversations in the next couple of weeks to build up to that. And then we want to do everything we can to give you the tools to be able to do that.
And speaking
Bob,
of,
ask you a question.
Oh.
You and Kelly, do you have any trainings on social media? How to train FBOs in social media?
there are resources for that we can share, Sharon. So that's certainly something that we can offer.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to mention too that our intern Sylvia has worked on creating a resource list with more information going into deeper detail in each of the different sessions that we talked about. And just something about some of the mindful eating information. You know, Alex has experienced this from his own work in the mindful eating sphere, but there's not a lot of it, I guess, work out there in the mindful eating sphere from communities of color. So we don't have too many of those resources. Alex could share more, I'm sure, at some point about his experience with that, but we do have a resource list that we can share with more information.
And one of the projects, you know, that we might want to consider, because we are going to have a couple of recommendations of some of the things ranging from, you know, doing a video campaign for the UN Food Summit that Kelly can give you more information on in the next session, to, you know, really coming together as a collective and decide to be a resource for others. You know, one of our intention is that you're mentors for, you know, the next class of individuals that we curate. And so that we can actually start to build, not in silos, but as a collective unit, a platform. So, you know, let's not think of this as a one and done program, but something that will be a journey that will be able to add more people, and we'll be able to direct and help the whole community navigate. But you being the pioneers of this first program, this first inaugural program of this kind.
Yeah, I just put in the chat the link. The UN is having a food system summit this year. It's the first of its kind. It's really exciting, and they're reaching out. They're actually interested in engaging the faith communities, and they have this campaign called Good Food for All, and they want people to create 1-minute videos saying, what does good food mean to you? So just something to think about. You know, you don't have to do it right away, but there should be more information on that website that I just sent.
Great. And with that, Sarah, could I ask you to give us the, shall we call it, benediction, and lead us out, just because I like the way you do
it. As we speak about our desires for change, we know that these desires, the desire for change, comes from a source that is far greater and far deeper than we are. That we are, even as we go forward to having courageous conversations in our families, with our churches and faith communities, and with our legislators, with our local security officers, and with others who influence the health and well-being of our communities, we know that we are not speaking from ourselves, but we are speaking from something much older, from a movement that is much older, and that we are part of a long, long lineage of people who have spoken for justice and for health and for well-being. And we do not do this work alone, but we do it with the grace of God. And we pray in this moment that our words and our actions at the table, in the kitchen, and with one another be filled with that grace and be filled with that love. May we be mindful and aware of how that love is with us at all times. Thank you all, and go well.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Everybody have a good,
Thank you all.
Wonderful
Thank you
week.
very much. It was
a
great.
great holiday weekend.
Enjoy the holiday.
Be
Thank you.
safe.
You too.
Be safe.
Amen.
Grill
Say wonderful.
some mindful food. Put the grill and grill some mindful food.
Some vegetable shish kebabs.
There you go. With some curry spice and some hot sauce.
It's some of it.
Hot sauce has a lot of salt.
Well, hot peppers. Scotch bonnet.
Oh.
Oh.
How you talking?
Now you're getting into mouth burning territory.
That's right. Now we won't eat.
All right.
Have a good evening.
Everybody.